Brent Gorda, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Steve. All right, so I'm thrilled to see the size of the crowd here today. Believe me, over the past 4 years, I had expected the direction could go differently than it's done. So to see this as the best attended Lustre user group is really a thrill for me, and to have a hand in helping form it is really satisfying. I feel like I'm getting Steve's echo and his blinding headlights. Woo! Don't lift your shirt, Steve.
Where were you on the 15th?
So, most of you know me from the WAM Cloud experience. We're now at Intel, and this will be our second LUG at Intel. I want to do a shout out to Xyratex and thank them for donating their URL of lustre.org to the community. I think is spectacular. This allows the community to unify around what people think of as the Lustre website and allows us as a community to get together and grow. And I think you need to recognize that and recognize that Xyratex did this on their own behalf while we were talking with them, and we are engaging with them on different fronts. This was a Xyratex and Seagate decision. It wasn't something that, while Ken gave a shout out to me, it wasn't something that I had a direct hand in. So it's really, kudos to them for doing that. So at Intel is quite literally one of the largest open source developers on the planet. Last year, #1 contributor to the Linux kernel. This year, #2 contributor. The slide's a little bit old. We trade places, I believe, with Red Hat with respect to number of code contributions. If I move, does that really mess you up? Good. I like to jog while I'm up here. So Intel has a very serious focus on playing the open source game with cards above the table. When we came in from WAM Cloud, we were accused of being open source tree huggers, very, very critical on any sort of practices that would go against the open source movement. Now that we're inside Intel, we see that plus formal processes that hold our feet to the fire with respect to open source code releases. As I'll talk about, we do the community releases. We have to pass through an internal process that has us check every line of code against Black Duck to make sure that there hasn't been any bad code from an unauthorized source enter the tree from any contribution, not just our own. So I think this bodes really well. Intel is definitely in the open source game and is very supportive of Lustre. With respect to our activity, we do the releases for the open tree, like I said. When Chris Marone is up here talking about the open releases, it's Peter Jones and friends who make those releases happen in our team. On the previous slide, it said Intel had 10,000 open source developers in 35 locations. We've added 75 locations to that because my team is 75 people in 75 locations. So we're doing this quite literally across time zones, across 10 different countries, and doing it incredibly well from everything I can see. I invite you to talk to anybody with an Intel badge here and give your feedback, because feedback is how we guide ourselves to go down this road. So we do the feature releases in association with funding from OpenSFS. We reached an agreement with OpenSFS a couple of years ago to do that. We do the gatekeeping as part of that agreement with OpenSFS. But we do the maintenance releases entirely on our own nickel. And we do a lot of development in a combination with OpenSFS, other vendors in the room and outside of the room, and on our own nickel. So we're doing a lot here with the open tree, and we're keeping it open so that you can have access and download the OpenSFS release whenever you want it. We are hosting the Open Lustre assets at this point. I'm hoping with the announcement from Xyratex this morning that we can get on a trajectory to move the assets towards lustre.org and make it indexable and searchable and get the bug database up there and all that sort of stuff for the community. I think that's a really good step forward. The one thing that differentiates us from other vendors in this game is that we do not sell you storage hardware. That might be a bit hard to parse because, of course, Intel does sell hardware. They sell the silicon in the majority of the systems that you use. But when it comes to storage and Lustre, my team does not sell you any hardware. Our only product offering is our effort on the software, as I'll show you in a couple slides, our release of Lustre, and then the development that we do. What we've learned in the past year, and as I started out saying, Lustre has reached a point of, I think, critical mass. We are ready to go into chapter 2 of the Lustre story at this point. I think we're on a very solid platform, and the community has grown up to be a very nice size. We've seen the code contributions from the community increase to where 25% plus of the code, if you take a look at Chris's slides this morning, are coming from the community, from yourselves, which is a really good sign in my books. We're getting more active use out of the community, more collaboration towards the end goal. It's critical to recognize and realize that the EOFS and OpenSFS are the backbone of this community. The community is not run by Intel. It's run by OpenSFS and EOFS. You need to be members of that community, and you need to communicate to the boards in your community so that they know what you're thinking. I want you to communicate with my team, with my sales guy, Brent, who just walked in. I want you communicating with him on business relationships. I want you communicating with our technical people on feedback as to what they're building, but you really need to be active participants in the community to continue this growth that we've achieved and are pushing forward. So we want to be a very strong supporter and a major contributor to these community groups. I think we've shown that we've been that in the past, and we continue to be that way. You may have noticed that Intel voluntarily stepped down from the board of OpenSFS at this point. So we are in the tier 2 of membership in the OpenSFS community. And I think that speaks well that the community's at a point where we don't need to be pushing that hard from the inside. We want to have you telling us what you want to see as opposed to the other way around. So what we learned in the last year also is that the market wants more than just an open release. Much like we saw 15 years ago, 20 years ago with the success of Red Hat, the Lustre consumers here have told us that they want more than just the open tree. They want to be able to buy support, and they want a branded release from Intel, which is what I'll get into. This, by the way, is a vendor talk. I've asked them to lock the doors at the back so none of you technical guys can leave. And I'm allowed to talk about product, so I'll be talking about product. The other thing that we learned in the past year, and I had actually been talking about for several years, is that there's opportunities beyond HPC. Customers with big data problems, when we were WAM Cloud and we went out to talk to customers with big data problems, they would get these wide-eyed deer in the head looks, kind of like I look with these lights here. And they would say, really, you could move data at 1 terabyte a second? But you'd have to say, yeah, but like Dr. Sims says, there's no steering wheel and the clutch doesn't quite work, and you kind of got to hold your hand like this to... We're on a track to try and fix that. It's slow moving, but we're on a track to fix that, and I think that will open up significant opportunity for everybody in the room. If you're a vendor, we're trying to open opportunity for you to sell your hardware to more than the HPC community, while not backing off HPC. IDC has coined a new phrase that they're trying to push out called high-performance data analytics. This is a market that's currently at $750 million and growing to $1.3 billion in the 16-17 timeframe. And it's quite literally the space that they see as the overlap of HPC technologies on what the high-performance, or what the data analytics crowd is trying to do. So that's what we've learned. What we've done about it is, last June, we announced the Intel Enterprise Edition release for Lustre. And in a cartoon, what this is the core open source Lustre with our management tool wrapped around it that I will talk about, value-added software that we're not releasing open source, that we're giving you if you subscribe to Intel support or the Intel Enterprise release. 24/7 worldwide support backed by Intel, and if you're a vendor partner of ours, we're also giving you the marketing materials you need to go out and to talk about Lustre in environments where they maybe haven't had Lustre before, where they've perhaps had Panasas or GPFS. I really want to have the focus of this group as how do we make Lustre win versus other technologies. This group really believes that Lustre is the best technology. We're trying to fill in the gaps and cover the potholes so that as a group we can go out and make that happen. This is the Intel manager for Lustre that we've been talking about for a while now. It was Chroma early on, and as we became Intel, they like functional names for their products, so we changed the brand name to Intel Manager for Lustre. It has had a significant amount of work on it. Specifically in the last year, it has come a dramatically long way. A lot of people are very happily using this right now. At what most of us in HPC would call lower altitudes, not the 500 OSS type machines, but the 10s and 20s and 50 OSS type machines. This software can take a raw set of hardware boxes and make them, with a point-and-click interface, turn them into your Lustre file system. So that is where we're headed. The tool right now does best when it knows what the hardware is underneath it, because it can reach down and tweak the parameters underneath it. So these are the slides that you've seen previously. I was exposed to a new feature called heat maps that we're releasing in the next release of IML. And I was quite taken by it because it's quite literally, you can watch the screen on your device, and now it can be your iPad. It doesn't need to be the screen on your desk. You can literally walk around your facility with an iPad in your hand, and you can watch timed updates, activities going on in your system, and tell at a glance if there's a problem that you need to take care of. So I think this is a really good step forward, something that you should be asking your Lustre or your Intel counterparts here. I'm looking for Chris Gearing in the back, who's on that development team. You can't miss Chris, he's large. So I invite you to go talk to Chris if you want to see a demo of this. I think they're demoing it, and I think it's pretty exciting. I'd love them to be walking around this show with iPads showing you how a test system is working. So high-performance data analysis. We've all known for a long while that HPC creates a lot of data, and thus the need for Lustre. There's an interesting overlap here with high-performance data analytics, and in the near term, it's with Hadoop, as Hadoop gets more and more traction and is more and more buzzword compliant. We found an interesting overlap that we talked about at the last LUG, and that is to put Hadoop on top of Lustre. So the thing you need to understand with Hadoop is the normal workflow with Hadoop is you have a data set somewhere not near your machine. Your first order of business is to copy that data set onto your machine. Then, because you bought El Cheapo hardware and it's likely to fail, step 2 is to make 3 replicas of that hardware. Now you've got your data positioned in the machine, and that can take hours or days to move all that data, of course. Now you can step back and you can start launching queries against that data set. Every time you launch a job against the data set, you quadruply redundantly calculate your answer, because something may fail and the default is 3 copies. So you're literally throwing away 75% of your infrastructure in that model. We think a better model is you have a global parallel file system, and incidentally, IBM and Isilon have both caught on to this and are doing the same thing. You pour data real time into your global parallel file system, and separately from that, your compute engines pull on that data to do whatever querying they want to do. And they can do it in real time because you're just reading a file. When you hit end of file, you can block, right? It's just a simple matter of doing that. That model, we think, is much more efficient. You don't actually throw away 3/4 of your hardware. You scale your storage separate from your compute. You get the benefits of a resilient file system underneath. So we're getting quite a bit of traction with this. And you may have noticed that 2 weeks ago, Intel made a substantial investment in a company called Cloudera, which is the leading Hadoop provider currently in enterprise situations. So you can expect that we'll be working with them specifically with the high-performance computing architecture in mind. So in the HPC world, 15 years ago, we took the hard drives out of the nodes, so there is no local storage. So Hadoop doesn't make much sense on a pure HPC system since there is no local storage. this should be a really good option for you if you need to run Hadoop, and many of you do. Tying it up to Lustre is a really good option for you to do this. The last thing to point out about this is that we're including it free with the IEEL release or with service from Intel. So this is not an upcharge from us. This is us trying to add value to the Lustre technology and the Lustre ecosystem. Just like with the Intel Manager for Lustre, there is no upcharge for that. It's you subscribe to IEEL or our services, and we give you the software to work with it. As I see the hook coming, I'll skip the architecture slide. I used to be technical, so I can actually read some of these. After that last talk, though, I'm not so sure if I qualify anymore. The last thing I want to talk about is Robert Reed, who's also here and who is also large in the back. We brought our big team, I guess. Robert Reed got Lustre working in the Amazon Web Services. And in that model, you can stand up a Lustre file system and you can configure capacity, IOPS, or bandwidth to your desire. And you can stand up and tear down file systems in AWS. Within a week of that happening, we had literally tens of customers kicking the tires that I would not call standard HPC customers, not customers that go to supercomputing or ISC, for example. They're movie studios, they're drug design companies, they're electronic design companies. Interesting, we put out a little bait and a lot of interesting fish came by interested in Lustre and this technology. We are currently working on a deep relationship with a company that knows how to do HPC in AWS. They're called Cycle Computing, and you can expect to hear more from the combination of Intel and Cycle Computing about high-performance computing on Amazon Web Services. What you can expect to hear from us in the next year, continued significant contributions. We are steadfastly in approval of moving things to the open source, the lustre.org URL, and continuing to hold true to the open source bits of this. You'll learn about a whole lot of new features here this week. I think we have 10 or so talks on these topics. We've got, as I counted this morning, there's 32 Intel people here. They're kind of hard to miss, especially when we brought the ones that are that tall. I really encourage you to go talk to them because we need your feedback. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know if you think we're going down the wrong path with respect to our roots here. Another thing that we are embarking on is a review of and focus on the processes for development. We're well down a path of simplifying the interactions with Lustre, and we want to go down a path to make the development process more robust and ensure that the work product that comes out is better for you. The Intel Enterprise Edition of Lustre will be joined in this year by another release of Lustre, another version of Lustre that we're tailoring to another community. And so you can look forward to that. It will be the same model where it's the open core with value-added software on top of it. And you should expect to hear quite a bit about both Hadoop and AWS out of us. And I believe I'm getting the hook, so I will stop.